Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Delighted to have you here for a conversation about the future of our community. I'm so excited to welcome you. I'm Jeff Abernathy at the college, and it is great to have so many from our community here this morning to talk about the next years for Alma College and how, amidst these great challenges that all communities face today, we can return to our thriving. It's an exciting moment despite everything. Alma brings real strengths to this moment, and I think it is those strengths, primarily our people, the people who make up this community, who will ensure that we can return out of this moment, to the recession that the world is entering into, with strength. Alma Aspires is the strategic plan for our community that's been developed over the last couple of years. Each of you has had a role in that, and we're so grateful to you. Its themes are people, prosperity, and place, and its central aspiration is to ensure that Alma, Michigan is the best small city in Michigan. Well, we know we have all of the elements here in our people, the people of Alma, to achieve all that we envision in this strategic plan. And we're so excited to update you this morning on some of the progress, to hear from you about your sense of the direction that we need to take in the years ahead. And to celebrate the achievements we've had thus far in the work of this Alma Aspires document. So to start us off this morning, I'm so grateful to Randy Thelen. Randy is the Vice President for Economic Development for the Downtown Denver Partnership. He was formerly Senior VP of Economic Development for the Omaha Chamber, and he is a Michigander. He is an Alma College graduate. Indeed, his first job in the development area was right here in Gratiot County, working for Greater Gratiot. We're delighted to have Randy. He is leading us in this Alma Aspires work, the work of our strategic plan. Randy, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having me back. It's really exciting to be maybe not back in Alma, but certainly with Alma. And I need to give a special thank you to Kelly there at Alma College for choosing my photo from maybe 15 years ago. I looked pretty good back then, so thanks, Kelly. I'm going to share my screen here just for a second, if you give me 1 second. So as Jeff said, this has been a remarkable stretch of time. If we think back, I suspect many on this webinar were part of the program back in October of last year when we went through a planning exercise and really tried to prioritize what is it going to take to bring Alma to the next level. And we spent some time in that beautiful Opera House facility and sort of brainstorm what the key topics were and what the key strategies would be. And when I think back to October, it's 9 months ago, but it certainly feels like 9 years ago. Time has changed, so much has changed. And when we revisited in January and kind of unveiled the plan, and all of you quickly jumped on board and were part of a series of committees and subcommittees to help move that plan forward, then the world suddenly changed in a dramatic way, and frankly in ways that nobody on this call has ever experienced before. Alma and the region had an additional challenge with the flooding that took place, and then most recently we've had a series of major protests that have really highlighted the challenges we've all faced from a racial dynamic as well as an equity dynamic. And so this year of 2020, we can all sort of maybe joke a little bit about how crazy it has been, but it has been. This has been the most challenging times of our lives. And I think how communities respond is critically important. And if we look back a bit through history, we can see that communities that really step into this and take on the challenge and then pivot towards the future are the ones that come out ahead. They're the ones that, the old adage of never letting a crisis go to waste is true, in making sure that Alma sort of takes advantage of this unique dynamic, this unique situation, and really finds a way to carve a path towards the future is critical. That's what I want to spend my time sharing with you today. So I want to start, hopefully this works, there we go. As Jeff said, the plan that we started in October and sort of finalized in January and set about implementing in February really centered around people, place, and prosperity, and the need for continue to focus on these three pillars of the plan. It's critical that Alma stays focused on that. And as you look into the different elements of the plan, What's striking to me, and I think it's striking to the leadership team there, is the plan still holds up in the face of all of these challenges, in the face of all these rapid changes. The core foundation of this plan still holds true. And I think as you look at some of these tactics, for example, under people, the pandemic and all the other dynamics of this year, I think would suggest we now are even more acutely aware of some of the challenges and opportunities that are here. I would look at like the early childhood support and daycare portion of the discussion for people. There's no question that the pandemic has shown a spotlight on issues like this, and the need for programs like that are only more, not less than pre-pandemic. So it's interesting to see. And as we move to place, the same holds true. If I just call out one here, I suspect everybody on this webinar has spent more time in an Alma Park in the last 3 months than maybe the last 3 years. It's this being cooped up in our houses have caused us all to want to get outside more, and we've found a way to embrace our parks and open spaces more than we have in the past. And frankly, we can look at Google data where they track us all the time, and it shows remarkable increase in park usage throughout the country, and I'm sure almost no different there. Again, within the place dynamic, all of these elements still hold true in a post-pandemic world. On prosperity, maybe more than any of them, we've seen a heightened need for response from the community and action from the community to move these elements forward. The high wage jobs certainly is critical as we try to climb back out of this high unemployment situation we're in right now. In technology, the group noted in October that there was a technology gap in Alma and across Gratiot County. And I think as our students adapted to learning from home, as our businesses adapted to many of their people working from home, that technology gap was even more apparent, and the need for action there is more than ever. And we now clearly recognize that. We clearly know that. I think the key, though, with that plan is a couple things. One, it's still relevant. It's still germane to the challenges of today, and it sort of survives the pandemic, if you will. I think also it gives Alma an incredible competitive advantage. Again, I think cities that keep 1 foot in the present and manage the crisis and 1 foot in the future looking towards what's next are the cities that are going to come out of this as winning markets. I think you absolutely have to manage your business, your civic organization, your city, your college, whatever it may be. You have to manage it for survival in this moment. Like, it is an incredibly challenging time, no question. And we can't move forward if the businesses and the civic organizations are not able to survive. So certainly that foot in the present to manage through the crisis is critical. At the same time, good companies, good communities, good organizations always have an eye towards the future and making decisions that are setting themselves up to come out of this downturn faster than others. That's really paramount as we look ahead. And we can cite examples around the country. We can look to markets in Michigan that have done this. Holland, Michigan, sort of Main Street USA, all-American city kind of place. They made decisions in the early 80s, in the midst of that sort of inflationary time or recessionary time, made decisions that really catapulted that community forward. They took bold action at a time when it was really challenging to take bold action. It's easier to hunker down and just sort of stay in the moment. It's tougher to lean into it and move forward. And I think this plan that Jeff referenced and we just walked through here, I think that gives Alma an opportunity to really take that leap when other communities are struggling, when other communities are stuck in the moment. For Alma to take one step into the future, I think it's going to be a powerful opportunity. And don't just take my word for it. We talked about this in the fall when I was there at the Opera House with you, and we talked then what I thought was a trend from major metros to smaller cities was going to be driven by housing prices. The cost of living in San Francisco and New York and Denver has grown substantially, and it's gotten to the point where it's difficult for young people to afford housing, to afford a house, and also to afford rent for that matter. Now it's only enhanced, and if you may or may not know Richard Florida, but he's a nationally known urbanist, major author, major thought leader in this space. And he's somebody, if you know him, he's always been a Toronto, a New York, a Miami, a Denver, San Francisco kind of big city thinker. But he recognizes the near-term opportunity for small cities like Alma. It's coming. And if you read the quote there on the left, he talks about an opportunity for small markets like in Alma to attract people and talent, especially in those family formation years when people now, if they've got a young child and they're living in New York or they're living in San Francisco and they realize they don't have the open space or park systems nearby that Alma would offer, they don't have the affordability that Alma would offer, and they don't have the fresh air, they don't have all those things that come with a smaller market, there's a wave of people, as Richard Florida says here, that are looking for those small towns. And just to reinforce this point, Ed Glazer, economist at Harvard, super sharp guy, and also a noted sort of urban thinker. He gives another example of why small cities stand to gain from this current dynamic. With all of the companies now looking at teleworking or work from home models that have worked and been successful, many are going to choose to continue some percentage of their employment as a work from home model. And so if, let's say you're working for a tech company, you're in Silicon Valley and you're paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month for rent or a mortgage or more, and you're working from home, you have to ask yourself the question, why do you pay that price when you could be anywhere in the country? And so Ed Glazer's comment towards the end of that quote there, you see, when people are freed from having to pay obscene rents in concrete jungles, many of these workers will move to low density college towns. Alma is a low density college town that also has the benefit of major quality employers and has the benefit of a hospital. It is an attractive place. The question is, how does Alma want to pursue this? It's, Holland is a college town that's an attractive place. Mount Pleasant, you've got Ann Arbor, a bit bigger, but when you think of maybe just those MIAA college towns, how does Alma want to compete with those to be the most attractive, college town that brings some of that talent to bear? It's a unique opportunity. I mean, the trends tend to switch back and forth like a pendulum. And for about 20 years, the pendulum has been towards bigger cities. And as these thought leaders suggest, it's moving towards smaller college towns that offer a lot of amenities and a lot of attractiveness. This is, to me, the opportunity for Alma. Excuse me. So what does Alma do now? Foot in the present, foot in the future. What do we do right now? At a high level, I think of this summer as a summer of experiments. We have to try everything possible to sustain our community. As we talked about earlier, managing your business, managing your organization, managing your city to get through this moment. And we've put our restaurants and retailers in particular through incredible torture and torment over the last 3 to 4 months. We've got to do things above and beyond to make their sort of economic environment a little bit more likely that these companies can survive and ultimately thrive going forward. So what can Alma do now in this moment of chaos and pandemic and recession and everything that's sort of stacking on top? Some of it is simple, right? We have to do things that are low cost, simple, fast to implement. And I know Alma has tested a bit of this type of activity, but certainly push the envelope. This idea of opening up streets to the public. We all want to be outside. We all want to go to the park. We all want to be, as humans, we want to be together. We need to provide opportunities for people to be together in a safe environment. And so many cities across the country, Denver, we've done this in a big way, opening up streets to the public, giving them more space to play. I like to think back when I was a kid, and I suspect when many of you were young, we used to play random pickup basketball games or random pickup baseball games in the backyard. And we played in the street many times. I lived in a small town, not a lot of traffic, so we didn't technically close the streets. We just took it over. We're seeing that now in communities across the country where when you provide this kind of space, these kids learn to bike, these kids play games on the street where we've never seen that before. And this summer, when we don't have organized soccer, when we don't have organized baseball, when we don't have organized team sports for kids, we need to give them opportunities to be creative and play. And so getting very aggressive on opening up streets for kids to play is a critical piece. Expanding outdoor dining, again, I know Alma has dabbled in this. I would say stretch as far as you possibly can and then stretch even further. People, just think about your normal dining habits. When you get a choice, a year ago when you had a choice to eat out at your favorite restaurant and you could choose between the outdoor table or the indoor table, I bet 8 times out of 10 you would choose the outdoor table. And that's proven to be the case now across the country as these type of, take a parking space that's shown here, take the sidewalk. Many places are taking advantage of streets that maybe don't need that amount of car traffic. Find a way to give the restaurants a better shot at success, give the retailers a better shot at success. And that means getting people outdoors. We're all individually, we've all seen a lot of the reports, CDC and what have you, about being inside is more risky than being outside. So let's give more opportunities for people to be outside. Here's a fun one that I found where communities are offering downtown drive-in movies. Again, it just brings people together. I don't suggest that any of these particular moves are going to save the day, but I do think they'll save the moment, where we do want to encourage people to come back together in a socially or healthy and safe way. But we need to provide opportunities for restaurants to sell. So in this example, maybe you allow restaurants to, if you do this in a park, or you do this maybe on a parking lot at Alma College or something, allow local restaurants to come by and serve hot dogs and French fries and soda and what have you. So just a chance. People want to be together. We have to do it safely. This is a way to do this. And I could envision this thriving in an Alma environment with the connected community that you have there. Last idea, and sort of an urgent right now opportunity, is get and mobilize volunteers. In a large city like Denver, it's not always easy to get large numbers of volunteers. It's just the nature of a large city. There's not that same connectedness that you would have in an Alma. But in this case, in this very moment, we were able to get 5,000 volunteers over 2 days to come in. You can see we're painting the street on the left. We're hanging up some basic art that covered up some graffiti on the right, but 5,000 people came out over 2 days to do this kind of activity. So is there a park cleanup project or a riverfront cleanup project or something you've always wanted to do as a community, but maybe haven't had the resources to do it? Well, now I would argue you have access to available workforce, if you will, volunteer workforce that is eager to get together, eager to do something great for the betterment of the community. I think you need to think through what those opportunities are and go after it quickly and aggressively. And I would say, don't worry about failing. I think, again, this is a summer of experiments. Some are going to work and thrive, and you'll continue them on for years and years. I'm not sure if Alma did this, but in our neighborhood, I had a high school senior that graduated, and we had a parade for these high school seniors where the whole neighborhood came out. Actually, it was like a 3-mile parade, and thousands of people came out to the street just to celebrate and clap for these graduates. And I think that's going to be an ongoing tradition as a result of this crazy time we're in. So look for those opportunities, look for those experiments this year that become traditions next year. And lastly, that foot in the future, I would just encourage Alma to take some big chances, take some big swings in this moment of chaos and crisis. Think to the future, look ahead, and think about what's possible. I go back to that moment in October where we all came together and put this plan together. We had almost 100 people that day thinking through what are the key points for Alma's future. Where do you want to focus your energy? What are the opportunities that are going to promote the biggest and positive changes possible? Let's not lose that energy because we're in this moment of crisis. Let's manage through that crisis, but then get back and get moving forward with that hopeful and optimistic future. We will get there. I mean, in 9/11 hit, we never thought people would travel again. We never thought people would get on an airplane. And 18 months later, we had more flights than prior to 9/11. So we'll find our way through this, and it will, if history holds, we will be better than we were prior to this pandemic. We'll be stronger as a result. It may take some time, but we will get there. And the communities that are driving forward today, that are looking, one step into the future, I think are the ones that are going to be thriving and able to make that big leap forward. So as Alma continues through this moment of crisis, I would encourage you to also continue going forward with the opportunities that are long-term and opportunities for the community to really excel and thrive. And there's elements of that all throughout this Alma Aspires plan that needs continued work by the community. I would encourage you to do that. And when you see an opportunity to make a big move, go for it. These are the moments that have in the past allowed other communities to make a big leap forward. And I think Alma, having a plan in place, have a strategy in place, gives you the opportunity to really take full advantage of this moment and work it towards your advantage. So with that, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to continue to engage with Alma. It's just been a great time over these last 9 months, despite the chaos that we're in. The leadership team there is incredibly cohesive. It's times like this when you see the things pull apart or come together. And as I've observed, Alma definitely has come together from a leadership perspective, and it's been great to see. And that gives me hope and optimism for how Alma will perform going forward. With that, I want to turn it over to my colleague over at Masonic, Bob Conley, who's going to lead a leadership conversation with the balance of the team. Bob?
Okay, thank you, Randy. We're all getting online here. There we go. Waiting for a couple more. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Bob Conley, and I'm from the Masonic and work not just with the home, but with the rest of the Masonic fraternity as well. And it's certainly my pleasure to help facilitate this panel discussion. What a great group we have here. I want you to also participate in this too. So if you'll look down to the bottom of your screen on the Zoom, you'll see to the right-hand side of the lower panel a little Q&A icon. Please be sure and pop in your questions, and our team will then move those over as we go through this. Then at the end of this, we'll start to get to your questions. Some great ones have already been put in there, and we'll try to consolidate some of those that are similar in nature, but great questions already. And I think that speaks to the quality of this community, that there are that many people that are involved and interested in its future. So our goal is to hear from the leadership of this community about how they've responded to the multiple challenges presented to us over the past several months, and to begin looking forward to what lies ahead. As Randy and Jeff noted earlier, as difficult as these times have been, they do offer us an opportunity to rethink old practices. And then how do we move forward with a goal not to return to normal, but rather how do we aspire to be a place that's better than before? So let's get started. And it's my pleasure to introduce then to all of you, our panelists, just real briefly. Representing Alma Public Schools, Donalynn Ingersoll. Representing Alma City, Matt Schooley. Representing Greater Gratiot Development, Mr. Jim Wheeler. And representing MidMichigan Medical Centers in Clare, Alma, and Mount Pleasant, Marita, Hattem-Schiffman. So welcome to all of you this morning, and I hope that you're ready for a great panel discussion. So much has changed in the last 6 months since we unveiled the Alma Aspires plan back in January. We hit the road running back then for a couple of months. We were really making some great progress, and then the world turned upside down with this pandemic in March. Then we had floods, and now a greater awareness and call to action surrounding the inequities in our communities. I'd like to hear from each of you on how you and your team has responded to these challenges. And I'm going to start with Donalynn. Donalynn, what were the critical decisions that you had to make early on, and what is working well now?
Well, Bob, that is really a great question. We learned that we were going to go into a 3-week school shutdown on March 13th in the early morning hours, and we pretty much flew into action at that point in time. We had 1 day to come up with a plan for how we were going to prepare and deliver food to our families, and 1 day to communicate that plan, because that was the last day that we had with students. And then it turned out that that was our last day for the remainder of the school year. And when we learned that on April 13th, the challenges became how to deliver instruction and how to meet the needs of our families from distance learning. We had some families who are without internet, so we had to come up with an alternate plan to just online learning. That posed a lot of challenges for us.
I understand that. What's working well now? How are we doing in Alma school system?
Some of the things that are working really well is we have actually prepared and delivered over 13,000 breakfasts and lunches within the 13-week school shutdown. That was a pretty major show of leadership and commitment to working really hard to meet the needs of our families by the whole team here at Alma. We had volunteers, we had support staff, we had food service director, all working unbelievable hours in order to pull that off. And then when we moved into distance learning, we were able to pull together support staff and teaching staff and really come up with a plan that allowed us to deliver instruction in 2 different ways, both online and then with learning packets. So those are a couple of things that worked really well for us. Now, I'm not going to say that anyone would say this distance learning was a complete success, because there are a lot of hurdles that still remain for that to be a good platform for kids to learn on. However, we learned some really wonderful things. We learned about intentional relationships with our families and being able to communicate with them in different ways than we're used to. So there are lots of things about this unintentional and unexpected school shutdown that we will use moving forward.
Absolutely. What great answers and what great successes you've had, even in light of some really difficult situations.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Matt Schooley, how's the city of Alma handling these things? What were the critical decisions you folks had to make? And then what's working well with you?
First, good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time this morning to talk about these things. And, you know, it's interesting to look back and decide on March 2nd, we had an admin meeting where we sat down and got together to talk about this potential crisis that was heading our way. But really it was a discussion at that point, and not really sure where it was going to go. And I think we were just trying to cover all of our bases, and we opened up our emergency operations plan and decided to take a look and see what we should be doing. Suddenly, within 2 weeks, our buildings were all closed. We had laid off 13 part-time drivers in our transit department. Went to our commission to ask to have take care of our employees, and they passed a emergency sick time use where folks could use that during this crisis. Within that 2-week period, we were able to take about 70% of our staff that works here in the municipal building and have them all set up to work from home. Pretty remarkable. We were able to turn that around that fast. We had split our work crews in our what we would call our 24/7 services between our police, our water, our wastewater. Those folks were now working on split shifts and doing things much, much different than we have. Then if you look at where we were, one of the most critical things is on March 4th, we had basically prepared our FY 2021 budget and we're ready to really start those talks. And the world completely changed at that point, and all of the talk about where our revenue is going to be going into this next year, and how are we going to make up for the loss, and where are we at. So we were able to, from March 4th until April 26th, through some pretty heavy meetings with staff and the city commission, to completely shift our budget and look at things. The hard thing is we have taken a very conservative approach, and we have already cut 11% out of our FY 2021 budget just to start, to make sure that we can make proper adjustments as we move forward. I think one of the hardest things through this has been just the nonstop flow of information. We all want information, we want to see that, but stuff was coming to us, you know, on an hourly basis, if not even faster, that was completely shifting what we were looking at doing. So always too, having to make sure that safety was the most paramount thing we were looking at, either through our employees or for our community, while still trying to provide the best services that we can. As I would say, one of our successes that we had was this early identification that we're going to have to work differently and work from home. And through staff's really diligent and hard work and some pre-planning, we were able to turn that around inside of 10 days to get everybody working from home, that we hope that we were able to continue the flow of work and keep some of the progress up that we've been making here in the city, so without much interruption. So it's been quite a learning experience. I think if you talk about what are the successes, I think it's definitely shown that we know we are able to adapt much better. The stodgy thought of government work and everything having to be done a certain way, we've kind of managed to move all that to the side and make decisions quickly that we think are best. I think one of my most enjoyable times has been our Thursday meetings that we've had with admin staff all the time, is just having that talk, to spend some time together, has been really seeing each other differently as we're going through this crisis. So it's definitely been a learning experience, and balancing the interest of the community with the interest of our own employees here has been one of the challenges. So we look forward to moving forward.
Great responses, Matt. I think when we come to the end of our little panel discussion this morning, I want us to think about too, what we've learned from this and what we'll carry into the future. And a lot of what you've just talked about is something that's going to be very powerful for all of us going forward. Jim Wheeler, you deal with the economic situation in the entire county. I know that, which is a big job. How is the county doing? What were the critical decisions that the county was making and that you had to make with your team? And then what's working well now through this, as we come out of this situation?
Thank you, Bob. You know, one of our first thing with us, we're a small staff in our office, but, you know, we have packed so much of our county base And it was one that with us, we were getting questions from numerous companies, can we open or do we have to be closed? If we can open, how do we open? And so we were faced with a lot of questions, and a lot of people don't realize how diverse our county business group is. I just was kind of jotting some lists as we were talking here, but healthcare, which Marita will talk about a few minutes from now, is our largest employer, but we automotive, chemical, defense industry, trucking, aircraft, boats. Obviously, there's a huge boat situation, construction materials, ag. We not only do ag, normal traditional crops, which is a big part of our county's overall geographic, but we now are, host the state's largest soybean processing plant by far. Renewable energy, all these types of businesses were impacted in different ways, and how they operate really led to how we can help them. And then on top of it, you have support companies that supply electrical supplies, fasteners, boxes, petroleum products. And so it's always amazing in a county of 40,000 people sitting here how diverse our actual business is in our area. And each one was impacted differently. About 50% of our companies were able to maintain and continue to go given the critical needs of manufacturing bases that they were considered. Others weren't. Issues though upon seasonality, I could pick our two largest manufacturers privately in Alma and St. Louis are both pontoon boat manufacturers. They were shut down through the month of April, which is their largest supplier delivery month, and so created a whole bunch of problems for different ones of how you can work through these things. I will say in all the discussions that I've had with all of our companies, the foremost thing has been employee safety. How can we make sure that our employees are able to come to work, be safe? All the protocols that we've now put into place and done this at just record time. I mean, this is indoctrination by fire of how you bring people on, how you talk about things, how you do it, how their workstations, cleaning. I say, I'm not going to pick on Marita, but I think there's some of our industrial manufacturers are as clean as a hospital is now. And not that the hospital's not clean itself, I would attest to that completely, but a whole different set of way of looking at things. And as I talk to our manufacturers now in our companies, most of them, a lot of these practices they're going to continue with going forward, because as we can help people not have flus, not have all these other types of things, the worker productivity can be greatly enhanced. And then on top of it, as we've talked about, is that how many people have now worked remotely, doing Zoom meetings and those. And personally, I still love the face-to-face interaction with individuals, but with Zoom, at least you get to see somebody. I can look at Matt staring me in the eye right now going, what's he saying now? But at least you can read people's facial and know whether you're communicating well and getting through to them. But we've all learned a new way to communicate. And I think so that's been our hugest challenge as it was. And when somebody calls you, can I be open? I've never faced anything like that. There's sometimes where if you had a natural disaster or something, you're working your way through it. But from a standpoint that you've been told you can't open, and what do you do? And so now, as all of our manufacturing customers have been able to come back online with the idea of how they put in protocols for safety. We've had some install now where you walk through a device that tells you whether you have a temperature or not, and different ones are doing different things in questionnaire and reminding people of that. Social distancing in a huge way. A lot of the social distancing problems were back to social issues. It wasn't when a person was in a factory floor, it's break time. I remember one of them said I had to break up the traditional euchre game at noon, and it about killed everybody. And so it was one of those just different way of looking at things that we've had to deal with. I think companies have jumped in immediately. And again, every call I always get though, and the thing that makes me feel really good about it is, I want my customers, my employees and those to be safe, and how we can manage, get our products made and go forward. And one of the biggest challenges companies are having right now is supply chains, because as our country opens back up, we're opening up at different stages, different thoughts. And so, you're seeing shortages of things. And I've always said in the automotive industry, you can't deliver a car and tell somebody you get the steering wheel in 2 weeks. And so it is an integrated manufacturing process through a lot of things. Most of our companies are part of the integration process that happens with it. Although we have, end makers of boats and some of these where they are the end product producer and have to be able to collect all of that in. So that's by far been our biggest challenges with companies. And then as we'll move through some of the other things, our smaller, our restaurants and things are just now being able to open up. I think huge challenges that people face with takeout. How do I deal with social distancing in, cleaning, all these types of things that'll go forward with it, Bob. But from an economic standpoint, and it turned us all on our head just immediately. And I will talk about ingenuity that people have been really fast and decisive. And it really makes you proud to work with a lot of people that have just really stepped up.
That's great. Thanks, Jim, for that, for those answers. I think, one thing, if you can answer just real briefly, is the supply chain coming back online? How's it performing to that extent? Are things starting to move? And just is that starting to ease up a little bit?
Yeah, in certain areas you're seeing it, but again, certain other ones you're not, Bob. And sometimes it's the little. We always laugh at the little. I mean, it's the traditional toilet paper shortage in a grocery store. I mean, it's the same thing in manufacturing. Even though you might have some small piece that seems somewhat insignificant, they have to have it. Sure. And so, but it's better. I can tell you every week it's getting better, but you could still, anyone could point out now is that there's still pieces of it that, that they may be supplied from overseas, having a hard time getting it through. So it's better, but still difficult.
That's great. Thank you, Jim. Marita, you're on the front line of this issue. You have been since it started on day one. It's been a great opportunity for us over at Masonic to have worked as closely with the hospital as we have, and we just treasure that relationship with you. So to the hospitals, perspective, and that's most especially Alma, but obviously you have others that you're in a place of responsibility for. What were the critical decisions that you folks had to make, and then what's working well now? Marita.
Goodness. Thank you for the opportunity. It's crazy to think that it's been a few months now, and it seems like it's been an eternity that we've been in this mode. I will never forget those first couple of weeks where, like everybody else, I just didn't believe it was happening. And until I was confronted with the projections, and then of course the government shutdowns and all that, it became very, very apparent. And always in healthcare, our first concern is keeping people safe. And in a crisis, it's the right thing to focus on, and it gives us a great foundation to start from. So that was our first concern. We have our regular patients who need care from us. We knew we were going to see COVID in our patients, and we need to keep our employees safe as we figure out how to provide all of this care. At the same time, we were asked to shut down all of our normal patient care operations and divert all of our resources to get ready for a COVID surge. So there are huge numbers of our employees that are in therapies and things like that there was really no work for them to do. So sending them home, trying to figure out if they could do something remotely, and then ultimately we provided all of our employees 3 extra paid weeks of time off in case they couldn't work or we didn't have something for them to do, so they would keep having a paycheck. So once we started thinking about how do we keep them safe and stabilize our employees, then obviously the thing we had to plan for was a patient surge. And I can say it now, I have to be honest with our community, the initial numbers that we were told to prepare for were absolutely terrifying. We were prepared to, we're a 97-bed hospital in Gratiot. We prepared to more than double that. We have 18 critical care beds. We were prepared to do 2.5 times those critical care beds, and still those were not going to be enough. And the good news in all of this is we did exactly what we needed to do as a community, and we stayed home, we socially distanced, we covered our coughs, we washed our hands, and we spent about 4 weeks of terror planning for a horrible surge, and just in time to see that we were making the difference, and the surge was flat. The whole projection was flattening, and that what happened was going to be within our resources. But those preparations were costly. We're glad now we know how to do that. In case this ever happens again, we know how to make that capacity. One of the coolest things was watching our staff cross-train. So one of the things that we had to stop doing was elective surgeries. So we have all these registered nurses who work in the ORs. They haven't been on the patient floors or at the bedside in years, and they immediately started retraining for bedside duties. And our bedside nurses started training for critical care duties. We had people who weren't in respiratory therapy training to assist respiratory therapy because we knew that the projection was telling us that that's what we would need. So our workforce just did an amazing job of preparing, and we're still so grateful that we didn't have to do any of that. I am responsible for our 3 medical centers down the 127 corridor, and Mount Pleasant and Clare also scaled up, but Gratiot is the hub. And I always want to talk about that because I'm not sure that Alma realizes that what we have in the medical center located in Alma is a regional community hospital that provides advanced care, high-tech care to now 6 counties of patients. So we were actually, of our whole system, and Midland is the biggest hospital, Gratiot was the first hospital to have COVID positive inpatients, and that was by mid-March. And we continue, we've only had maybe 3 days since this started where we haven't had COVID positive inpatients. Fortunately, not a large number. So we've gotten good at caring for this disease, and we've been serving patients from a multi-county region. And good job, Gratiot. Again, the majority of the patients that we've cared for are not from Gratiot County. They're from other counties that we serve on the critical care side of things. So we're so proud of that team. Early on too, the other big challenge was managing constantly changing information, whether that was what's the right personal protective equipment for people to wear in different situations, how to get that equipment, what lab tests are the most accurate tests, how to get those testing supplies. And that's much better now, but it continues every day because if you watch the news, you can see drugs that were hailed as the miracle drug have now been completely banned, and there's new drugs, and it's constantly changing. So we've gotten really good at caring for COVID. And by that, I mean, we know how to keep COVID versus non-COVID patients equally safe and well cared for. We know how to keep our employees protected from catching COVID from patients who are coming to us for care. We've got that down. What we don't know yet is really the most effective way to take care of COVID. And I think it's important for our community to realize as we open up again, the virus is still out there and none of us still have immunity. We've been doing antibody testing, which is another success story, but of all the people we've tested for antibodies, meaning evidence that they've had it, whether they knew it or not, only about 8% of the people we've tested who absolutely are sure they've had COVID-19 actually have antibodies. So most of us don't still have immunity to this. The virus is still there. We can safely open up as long as we're masking, socially distancing, having those clean workplaces that Jim was talking about. If we do all those things, we can get back to a new normal, but not continue to spread this infection. And, everybody's guessing, is there going to be a second wave in the fall? Nobody really knows. We just have to be really responsible supporters of our community and of each other to limit that spread. A couple other success stories. We opened telehubs so people with symptoms could call versus go out into public and potentially infect others. We do virtual visits now in all of our practices. And actually, as we open up again, people are not as interested in virtual visits, which is surprising me. I thought that would last a while. I think that's part of our new normal. Another cool thing that's happened is, I think from a national level, our government and our society is now recognizing how important it is to have state-of-the-art healthcare in rural settings. All the emphasis at first was on those big cities where virus was spreading quickly, but rural has to be strong as well because we're going to care for these things in our own proportion. And strong healthcare is one of the foundations to a strong and healthy community that can grow and prosper, which is exactly what Alma Aspires is about. So I'm thrilled to see that recognition. We're starting to see a little more attention to rural healthcare, more resources. We're seeing it for nursing home and long-term care as well, which has been overlooked for a long period of time. I believe our healthcare system is going to emerge stronger and better supplied for the long term, and that will be very good for all of us. But I could keep going. I will stop there unless you have another specific question for me, Bob.
Well, we've got more to talk about, so it's going to be a great panel. Thank you, Marita, so much for those answers. And I'm going to ask a question of everybody, and then we're going to kind of move into the more hopeful pieces of our conversation this morning. I'm going to ask, what was the worst day inside of this, inside of our situation from March until the present? What was the worst day? I know for me in Masonic, in that world, we were 11 weeks COVID free, and we were so proud of that. And then boundaries don't seem to stop a virus. If it wants to get you, it's just going to happen. And since then, we've managed very well. But of course, we've also had the bad effects of that virus. Terrible disease. But that was a worse day for us. Certainly for me, when we had our first positive COVID patient. What was the worst day for you, Marita? As long as I've got you on screen, what was the worst day for you?
There's kind of a series of things. First, having private knowledge or professional knowledge of what the projections looked like, and having to take that to my senior team and explain to them that our worst case that appeared likely at that time was that we would not have enough supplies and equipment and staff to take care of our community.
Mm-hmm.
And facing that and trying to figure out how do I lead through that. And fortunately, I won't get into the books I was reading, but I had a little bit of inspiration and reminder that if you look at history, time and time again, human beings have been faced with things that they could not possibly comprehend ever facing. And every time we find a way, we are far more resilient than we believe. And I was able to share that with my team. Then to go out and round and see all our employees with that knowledge in my head, but to try not to source that anxiety to them. And then getting out, thinking I had my handle on that, getting out there and realizing they were watching the news and they were as anxious as anybody.
Sure.
And they were terrified of that they might not be able to take care of their community, or might be placing themselves at risk as well, and trying to balance that and rise to the challenge. Those were the toughest days, with the biggest relief coming when we saw that the surge wasn't going to be as bad. I'd say the other day, and it's definitely one I want to share with the community, is, and I don't remember exactly where it was in all of this, but at first the community was so supportive and continues to be very supportive. But when people started rebelling against the requests that people mask and socially distance and all of that, it suddenly felt like the community wasn't supporting us anymore, because we knew we're putting ourselves on the line to take care of our community. And if our community does their part, this won't happen. But when it seemed like the community was not willing to do those things anymore, we realized they were putting themselves at risk and all of the people who work in healthcare at risk. And that was a tough one too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I empathize with that. I felt that myself. You bet. Donalynn, what was the worst day that the schools faced?
Well, like Marita, I would say it was a series of days, but for me personally, April 6th, the day that we learned that we were not coming back to face-to-face instruction for the remainder of this school year, was a real moment for me, realizing that as we kind of threw together a plan on March 13th, communicated that plan, that really was the last time I was going to see kids in the hallway. And it was the last time I was going to be able to interact face-to-face with students. That was a really rough moment, I think, for all of us on the leadership team at Alma Schools.
Thank you. Absolutely. Matt, worst day in the city of Alma in your mind?
I think that through this, we'd reached that operational mode, coming in every morning to a dark building. That just weighed on you every day. But even as a point where that became the new normal, I think for me personally, it was the day of the flood. I remember starting meetings at 8:30 that morning, setting up for what we were hearing was coming. Then we started to see it coming, and then slow, and we had probably 5 or 6 meetings throughout the day. And I do remember by the end of the day of just stopping and thinking, what's next? It just felt like you manage your way through something and here's another, and you manage your way through something and here's another. And it was the only time through this process I personally at least felt like overwhelmed. I thought getting to that next stage just never comes. By the time I got home that night, though, to receive a call from the EOC about what was going on in Midland and would we be available to do anything there, was you step back again. You step back there and say, well, as bad as you're feeling right now, look what's happening right near us and what's going on around us. So you just kind of plug back into that. So I think that's the day that just kind of hit me, as it just seems like one thing after another.
Yeah, our friends not that far away really faced a huge trial in the middle of this pandemic, and there's just so little that we could do about it. No, I feel that. Jim, how about you? What was the worst day of your experience in this whole pandemic situation?
Yeah, I tend to agree with the others. It was kind of a a mixture of days. But probably the biggest one I had is I think when we got our number that came out that our unemployment rate was north of 25%, which was off the charts.
Right.
I mean, really, to comparable to the Great Depression, where you see that. And I remember walking out thinking, what happens if all of a sudden a quarter of our businesses don't come back,
Right.
or half of them don't come back? What's our county going to look like? Or how did we go from rocking and rolling to crash and burn so fast? And that was probably the biggest eye opener that I had that says, wow, this is serious. And, not downplaying the health part of it either, but it just when you start looking at it, you think, what's your future going to hold with it? So that was probably mine. But like I say, that going forward now, we're seeing the good parts, and I guess that's the rest of our discussion, hopefully, as we go forward. But
Yeah, absolutely.
25%. How do you go from 3 1/4 and begging for employees, doing everything under the sun, to that in such a short period of time? It was just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's something I hope we never have to see again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take that thought though. Then that we've come out of this. We're coming out now easily and very carefully. I want to ask you folks, what have we learned about Alma during these challenging months that we can build from? Let's try to keep our conversation a little succinct about that. But what have we learned over the last few months that we can now use to build upon as we start to move forward? Are there new approaches to our work that will carry forward, make us stronger? Some of us, Jim and Matt, mentioned remote working and how that's changing the dynamics of what we do. So just as we talk about now, what have we learned during these challenging times that will help us build a better tomorrow for Alma? So let's go back to Donalynn. What are your thoughts on that, Donalynn?
So I have learned that our community and Alma Public Schools, maybe specifically, are built of amazingly resilient staff, families, students. Has been a real lesson for me in what we can be asked to handle, and our ability to come together and to support each other and to get the job done. We have learned an awful lot, and an awful lot of things that we are going to have to do better at if we have to continue with digital learning or distance learning. We are going to have to face some challenges, and we're going to have to solve some issues. But I do know that we have the key people in place to make those things happen.
That's great. Thank you. Matt, how about you? What have we learned in the past few months that we can build on for a better future?
I think I just echo the resiliency piece that Donalynn spoke of. I think not just within the work staff here that I have in the city, but in the community. You think of how much we've adapted in a very, very short period of time to being creative, to trying new things. Everything we're trying to do now, we're looking, yes, we've got to get through a crisis. We're looking at a financial impact that we're going to have from this. But I'm also trying to say, what are those things that we can sustain that will change us? You talk about in government working from home, those types of concepts are so foreign that we're looking at and saying, no, this really works. The community has learned very well how to still function inside those of using our Dropbox, starting to use online for bill pay, different things like that. I think it has been really good. That idea of having processes in place and have done some planning. We've talked as a staff more during this time than in the other 2.5 years I've been here. It's been nonstop conversation. And I think it's time to take that, as what we're doing today, is take that conversation also from here, just within our own organizations, but continue to include the community in that as we go forward.
Great. Thank you. Jim, what do you think? What have we learned over the last few months that will help us build a better tomorrow for Alma and its surrounding community?
Yeah. I think one of the things, and we've talked about it as our whole Alma Aspires, has been, what the advantages of small towns. And I think now all of a sudden it's a huge advantage. None of us here got on and I'm not downplaying it, but, mass transit to get anywhere. I mean, we ride in the safety of our own automobiles. We can bike. I'm sure Jeff Abernathy bike to work today. There was no doubt about that. Matt very well did too. It's one of those cases that we're seeing ways that we can we can walk to dinner, we can social distance ourselves, but then we can also get together in a much easier way. Not standing in an elevator shaft waiting for going up a thing when you're crowded in. So all the types of things that we can add the advantages to of a smaller community. And as we talk about some of it going forward, that as we can get ourselves interconnected on the internet as we are now, that, we're seeing that on TV now, where, it used to be you watch CNBC in the morning and everyone they're bringing in is usually in their studio. Now, none of them are. They can be from anywhere. So we can offer all the benefits that you need to live, but yet have the freedom, the health care, and the type of things where we don't have the crowds. You can do these type of things, social distance, but yet get together with each other, that other areas just don't have that ability. And now what used to be sometimes thought about as a negative, now it's a huge positive for us. So it's exciting what you can think about, what you can do. And, I'm not going to knock the big cities. Randy's there from Denver, but I'll tell you right now, if you take a poll of a lot of people, would you rather move to Denver or Chicago, or what about Alma when you talk about here? Because you can separate yourselves, and you can have relationships with people that you can call on when you need help. When you can call the superintendent of schools, the city manager, and they know who you are. And it really, the head of the hospital, the head of the Masonic home, and these kind of relationships that get built locally now, I think are just even more and more important to people, and it's a great situation.
Great thoughts. Thank you for that, Jim. I agree 100% with that. Marita, how about you? What have we learned over the last couple of months that we can use to build a better tomorrow?
Echo what Donalynn said about our community and its capabilities, its resilience, and what happens when it comes together. That community support has just been amazing. I think in healthcare, both we who provide it and those of you who partake of it have come to realize that virtual care works better than we thought. There's been a lot of resistance on both ends, and that has served us very well for reasons beyond COVID-19. Again, I think the recognition from a governmental level and a federal level that rural healthcare needs to be state of the art as well. There have been lots of regulations that got completely undone for the pandemic that weren't serving the healthcare industry well anyway. There's been a lot of artificial pressure to decrease healthcare, decrease the size of healthcare, especially in rural settings, only for us to realize that we need to be scalable. So I'm really hoping and praying and advocating that some of those regulations that were undone for the pandemic can stay undone, or perhaps be better done than they were in the past. On the same line of thinking, MidMichigan Health has always been about strong healthcare in a rural setting, but we realized we're not a wagon wheel, we're more of a series of hubs and spokes. MidMichigan Health's always invested, particularly in Gratiot, to keep us state of the art. And even though we've hit some really difficult financial times, we're going forward with a number of things to make sure that Gratiot remains scalable. We're replacing our MRI right now. We just put in some more technology in our cancer center. We're going to go ahead and remodel our outpatient lab to get that up to a higher contemporary standard. And so we have better social distancing in that setting as well. And the best part is we did get approved to spend $24 million on new operating rooms at Gratiot. So that's a couple-year project, and it's a little bit delayed because of the financial hit we've taken, but that's going to happen. So Alma will continue to be the place where MidMichigan Health has created the most state-of-the-art care we can possibly provide in Central Michigan. And that will continue to create jobs and create a great foundation of care for our community. And then lastly, I really think each of us as community members have learned in a more intimate way that none of us exist in a vacuum, and our actions individually have an immediate effect on not just our family and our friends, but our neighbors and our community. We flattened the curve in a very dramatic way. For years, we've been begging people to cover their cough and wash their hands during flu seasons, and it doesn't happen. COVID was much more threatening than that and much more infectious than that, and we stopped that thing. We slowed it way down. So if we can use that and remember that it's not just our health decisions, but it's our social decisions and our financial decisions. Everything we do as an individual affects the health of our community. And let's keep that in mind and carry forward, especially when it comes to Alma Aspires.
That's great. What a great segue then, Marita, into a question that was posed to us by Stephanie. I think this is a great time to ask this and have our folks give us their thoughts on it. Stephanie asks us, what steps can we take to ensure that folks from diverse backgrounds feel welcomed, valued, and safe in our hometown of Alma? So I'm going to start with Donalynn. We'll kind of keep the same order here. That puts Donalynn on the spot, but I know she got such a great answer for this. So Donalynn, how do you feel about answering?
Well, I think that we have a lot of challenges in front of us, and that's one of them. We need to be sure that we are making decisions and moving forward with the things that let everyone know that Alma is a place where they belong.
Great. Thank you. Matt, City of Alma. How would you address that question?
One of the areas that we had already put some things in place, and it's hard because you don't want to always look like you're just responding to something. Our police department has been undergoing an assessment of all of their policies, procedures from the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police. So we've got some of those things in place that will start to really look at that. But from the standpoint when you're talking about that, I think everybody needs to personally take a look at themselves and say, a lot of this comes down to, are you a good person? Do you feel good about other people? Are you going to respect other people? For the most part, we have a community that's very respectful of folks. I think that we need to then continue to make sure. I'm an old DARE teacher from way back when, and so the concepts sometimes are, we need to reverse some of the pressures and make sure that people understand that is the expectation in this community, that we are accepting of folks, that we are accepting of anybody who comes here and want to welcome them to this community. And I think Alma Aspires is a great place for us to continue down that path.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Jim, any thoughts on how we can make our population and folks feel safe and welcome in our community?
I think we need to continue to be focused towards that. For a smaller community, by having a college here, we've had diversity of folks that have always come to be involved as employees of the college, of the hospital, Masonic, that have been sort of our larger, what I would call institutional type industries, and then also industry itself that we've had a number of people come. And I think and for the most part, usually felt welcome in an area, but to focus back about it, saying hi to people, waving at somebody, and as we talk about it, that, hey, you see somebody on a sidewalk here, you say hi to them. And sometimes it surprises people a little bit that you're doing, but that they feel like, hey, everybody fits in here. We've got a spot for you. But I think our community's been used to seeing people of different looks, shapes, colors, and that. And so it's not such a surprise for us to do it and to feel welcome here. But it's all of our duties to make sure that we reach out to people. And as anybody that's new to an area, that we say, hi, who are you? You get to learn who they are and they learn who you are. And I think it's really important to operate that way. So
absolutely.
I feel it's been that way, but I think we need to continue and double down on our efforts.
Absolutely. Thank you. Marita, I know that you're a newer transplant into the Alma community, although it's been some years now that you've taken over the reins of the hospital system. You came in just after Joe Neal and I did. What are your thoughts on that, on the diversity issue and how we can make our friends and families know that they're welcome and safe here?
I think we have a long way to go. We are not a very diverse looking community in Alma. And it shows up for me at the hospital because we have 1,000+ people who work there, and we partner with educational organizations from across the state, including institutions that are in much more diverse places. So as we recruit those folks in, they don't see themselves here. And I can remember my first couple of months here, we had a nursing student, I think from over in Saginaw, who's African American, and she wouldn't stay on her rotation with us because she was uncomfortable. She didn't see anything that looked like her there. It's much better now, but between physicians who have diverse religious backgrounds, my own husband is Jewish, he doesn't see himself here. I think with Floyd George, that situation, it really hit me over the head, and it kind of goes back to what Matt said about we each have to look at ourselves. I've been through lots of diversity training. I've lived in very diverse places. I really thought I understood all this. And the day after the full video aired of the suffocation of that gentleman, I walked up to one of our African-American employees and his eyes were red and I could tell he had been crying. And I asked him what was wrong. Kind of dumb, I didn't make that connection. But he started talking about what that video meant to him. And I didn't know what to say. I had, despite everything else I faced in my career, I had no idea what to say to connect with him and that experience. And it made me realize I really don't get it yet. I don't get it well enough. So I do think Matt's right. We each need to look at ourselves and say, am I assuming that I understand? Am I assuming that people around me are comfortable? One of the most important things I think was said to me recently was, I have said before and others have said, I don't see color. When I stand with a group of people, I don't see who's Hispanic or Jewish or Black or anything else. I don't see color, I just see everybody the same. And what was said back to me was, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to see me for who I am and respect and value and appreciate me for my ethnicity, for my religion, and see me as an important part of our team and our community. And that just really hit me upside the head. So I think that's the level of thinking we each need to do as community members and community leaders, and really think about how do we make people who are different feel at home here, and that we love them for their differences, and that their differences make us a better place and an enriched community.
Absolutely. And I think this is the time too that we could really put into an expectation that our community comes together and has these conversations and comes to this place of understanding. This is the time to do that. This is what we've been given. So I hope that we'll make the best of it, and we'll certainly take these opportunities to make sure that it does happen in Alma. I have no doubt that the leadership of the city and our group in Alma Aspires will continue this path, and I'm very excited about doing that. Well, you know, times like these require all of us as leaders of our various groups, as well as our community, to have, as Randy states so eloquently, one foot in the present and a foot in the future. We have to manage these crises in real time and protect our businesses and organizations and our community. And we have to look ahead to what's next. So let's turn to the future now. Where do each of you see Alma in the next 3 years? So 3 years from now, where do we see Alma? What will it look like? And we'll continue to answer some of our questions that have been posed. But let's see. We're going to go back to Donalynn. And Donalynn, where do you see Alma Schools in 3 years, or in the larger context, perhaps our community?
This is a tough one for me right now, because I'm not really sure what is going to happen for Alma Schools
Sure.
months from now. So my hope certainly is that as a community that we've picked up all of those pieces of really wonderful things that have come out of this pandemic, and we are able to integrate those fully into our whatever our new normal life routines are.
Good. You know, saying that I don't know what it'll look like in 3 years is a good answer. I've been involved in strategic planning for 30 years, and I can tell you that a pandemic was never part of my plan. So yeah, that's a good answer.
Right
Matt?
now, I'm focusing on trying to figure out if we're going back to school in the fall and what that's going to look like. But
Absolutely. And one of the questions was, you know, what do you think that'll look like if we do? That's a tough question, and a lot of people are asking that one. Absolutely. Matt, what do you think the city of Alma will look like in 3 years?
I think, you know, I echo kind of where Randy started us off today. There is I always try to see opportunity in whatever we're going through. And I think there is a real opportunity here. I think you are going to see folks who would like to live in different areas, away from the big cities, away from that. And so those that have the resources and have things. But this dovetails into the question we were just talking about. It has to be an accepting community. We have to make sure that we are doing those things in order to attract folks who want to live here. And I think that those communities that take the aggressive approach, like Randy had spoke of, are the ones that are going to benefit long term. I can't paint all roses and everything be rosy, because we have real questions when it comes to the financial impact of this, and where is our revenue going to come from, and what are we going to do? But I think to continue to reach out there and look and say, what can we do with opportunity? I'll tell you one of the things that we've looked at from the commission standpoint in the city. we are in a pretty good spot financially from a fund balance, but we also are smart not to know that we just use this to cover everything. That's why we've still made cuts, because we want to be prepared to be able to do certain things as we go forward, so that when those opportunities arise, the city is in a good position to do that.
You know, Matt, one of the questions, I'm going to kind of go offline here for just a second. One of the questions that's asked by one of our downtown business people is what are the chances that the state will allow us to shut down a few blocks of downtown? I know that you've been working on that question with the state. Is there an update that you can give to us and to our participants out there that are asking this?
Sure. So I know one of the things we're going to get to later is where does Alma Aspires stand right now? There have been some things still going on, which is really interesting to see that were organic. This wasn't somebody forcing it back and saying, geez, we need to get back together. There was a group that really started to get back together. How do we bring this community back online? And so actually it's the marketing and the event planning groups that were really involved in this. And we're looking at a date in August 21st, 22nd, to do a Celebrate Alma in the middle of everything, hashtag in the middle of everything. And actually I had a talk with MDOT yesterday where we're talking about the possibility of being able to shut down Superior Street for a street fair type thing to bring everybody back in distance. So that's a one-time event as opposed to long-term what we're looking at. The commission has committed to working with our downtown businesses, especially to say if we can help you in expanding your sidewalk cafes. And I will say the business community has been fantastic to each other as saying, I'm not open at night, so sure, please push your tables out further, which gets you more space. We have on the plans, if this is very successful and continues to move forward, the commission has talked about, can we close a street? Can we do something like that to look at? So those are all on the radar. We're also working with the Liquor Control Commission, because one of the big things is how do we allow, the bars and the pubs still to be able to serve. Their liquor licenses are very important to them. So we need to make sure we're still doing that within the rules. So I'm anxious. I'm anxious to see us get started on something like that, and hoping that some of the restrictions are that we can do this in August to be able to shut down the street and start to look at different things to celebrate Alma.
Yeah, I think it's so crucial for all of us, especially to make sure that we do support to the fullest extent possible our downtown businesses. That really is so key to this this improvement of not only the community, but also, we've got to have that strong economic base, and that's a lot of the places where that's going to come from. So those folks, I know, I can't, well, I don't know. I cannot even imagine how they have felt the stress and the pressure they've been under over these last few months. So I know that they'll absolutely appreciate your involvement in this, Matt. I know you've been working hard for them. Who didn't I get to for the Jim? What do you see? Where do you see Alma in 3 years, Jim?
Tough. I kind of feel a little bit like Donalynn, but I considered. I still think we're going to have a continued diverse manufacturing base here. I mean, we continue to have people take looks at us, what our employment numbers look like, and some of those. So I think we're going to continue to have opportunities. We've got a big piece of land on the east side of Alma that's very suited for development. So I think as we see that traces forward, that some things will happen there. I agree with Matt on the downtown side. I think around the state, we're seeing people taking some pretty bold actions, and I think we will do that. And I'm hoping, some of the regulations and some of those can step back a little bit and say, use common sense approach to these things, and can we have it and go forward with it? Because it is really important to support our little local merchants that come forward with it. They're the ones that have the least amount to fall back on, and generally are ones that it's the sole proprietors that still started everything. I mean, one of our largest companies in town started in a garage,
yeah,
and and built from there. And so that's where these things come from. And so supporting local people, I think we've been trying to take out food, being able to do things online. And going forward. And then again, the connectivity of the internet's really seen. I think Donalynn could talk about it from educational standpoint of a number of people that still don't have computer access and Wi-Fi access in their homes. And we need to continue to push that out and make it happen. And as we do that and stay focused in those, I think some of the other pieces will come together. So a lot of challenges, but hey, it's exciting. It's something to really look forward to on it, instead of it seems like just been so glum and bad lately that to look forward to some positive things happening. Really, and I think people want to put their effort behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when we look at then what do we see in the future, it really comes down to a question of where do I see ourselves? Where do we
Yep.
see me, Bob, in the future? And I see a really good place for Alma. I see a place that's inclusive, that's caring, that's supportive, and that's moving forward and attracting young families and very diverse folks who come to us because this is a great place to live. I found that. I hope that other people will as well. I'm going to ask Jeff Abernathy to pop back on into our conversation. And Jeff, I know that Alma has a vision, or Alma College and Alma Aspire has a vision for the next 3 years. So Jeff, if you're out there, would you pop back on and just let us know what that is?
Well, thanks, Bob. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and so grateful to the panelists for their work and their leadership in this community. We've been thinking a great deal about what these next years hold for Alma College. I think it's fascinating to see in this time of such great challenge, we've all found great strengths. And that's certainly true for us here at the college. We had to turn to online in a matter of days. Our faculty were amazing in doing so. And all of us acknowledge that is not our wheelhouse. That's not what we do best. And yet we found, great strengths, that may stay with us. I think will be a part of Alma College for our future. And I think many classes will be hybrid in the future. So for Alma College, I think we are finding that we will be on the path to thriving again, in part by learning from these experiences, helping to find ways to deepen student learning. But for us, I think the partnership with Alma, Michigan, with the broader community, Gratiot and beyond, is absolutely key to our success. And I think what we'll see is that as we get back to work, as we get back to something like normalcy, we're really going to return as a community to that path to thriving. My own sense is that we in Alma maybe sometimes think too much about scarcity. Without recognizing the abundance that is here. We wait for that angel investor, for something to replace the refinery or whatever it might be, when in fact, all the resources for our thriving are right here. And it's that framework of abundance that I think we have to have. And Matt alluded to it in that phrase we've all been using. Sometimes folks come to this community and say, gosh, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Well, not at all. We're in the middle of everywhere. And this place has all the resources that we need all the abundance that we need to thrive, and we're going to get there together.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff, very much. Two of the questions that are left up on our screen, and I don't want to miss those. One of them from Cheryl is, who wants to do the drive-in theater? And I think that our committee, our subcommittee on entertainment venues would be a great place for that to go to. And I'll certainly champion that over to that committee, and we'll see what we can work out. I know in the past, Alma or Masonic has had big screen movie evenings, and we did that in August for a couple of years, but we'll certainly help with that. So we'll pledge Masonic's assistance in that. I think it's a great idea, and it'd be a lot of fun. Then in what ways can we expand the outdoor spaces for downtown restaurants? Matt addressed that a little bit. I would encourage Cheryl to get with Matt, or Matt to get with Cheryl, and see how we could assist them in doing that as well. Such a great downtown, and we just love being there and being part of this new adventure. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank the panel for participating today and for all of your leadership through this pandemic and through everything else related with it. The only blessing in there is that we didn't get the murder hornets this far east, so that's a good thing. But we've all witnessed through this session that Alma's leadership is strong, it's supportive of one another, and is prepared to help us lead forward. So thank you, everyone, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bob, and everyone. What a great conversation this morning about Alma's abundance, about our rich future. We can achieve all the things we've envisioned, and Alma Aspires by working together. Well, Alma has, since our founding, been a community that has been willing to take bold steps, to take big risks and big bets on our future. think of Ami Wright coming over here from Saginaw. He could have gone many, many places. He could have gone, to many places right here in this county. Chose Alma precisely because he saw here the resources to thrive, and thrive he did, and thrive our community has, through the century and more since he made that decision. That's our opportunity now together to make a big bet on Alma, to take some risk, to make bold steps for our future, to ensure that we will thrive going forward. Well, we've seen from the conversation this morning that we've achieved much together, and yet we have so much more to do, so much more work for each and every one on this call, for all in our community. We can become that vibrant, that thriving community that we envision. We can be a more diverse, a more inclusive, a more welcoming community as well, at a time when the pain of injustice is clear across our nation. We can do all of this together if we come together, roll up our sleeves, and build on our many strengths. Thank you all on the call for being a part of Alma Aspires. Now is the time to get to work. I want to thank all the panelists, thank Randy Thelen as well.